don't think anyone, has anyone seen a Mitt Romney sign in a department office here? I'd probably bet money on that, that you haven't. Yeah, and so I'd like to add, you know, the students just are not exposed to other perspectives and to our rich cultural heritage and to the reality of our history. There are so many things they don't know. You know, one example I had when I was in grad school, I remember I was taking this rhetoric course, classical rhetoric, and the professor said to me, because I was always butting heads with him, he said, you know, you're such a fascist that you might even like Richard Weaver. And Richard Weaver has been forgotten, and I, of course, immediately after class, I went up to the library stacks, checked out his books, and there's this brilliant mind. And he's just about forgotten. He's in the dustbin of history. So that's what I think students lose on that. Well, how did this happen? I've often made my students read the Port Huron Statement. It's a manifesto of the Students for a Democratic Society written in 1962. There they laid out their plans. They were going to bypass the political you know, avenues and the institutions, and they were going to basically go into education and spread their ideas that way. And it's been estimated that 25% of the members of the radical Students for a Democratic Society who you know, were pro-communist during the Vietnam War have gone into education, and they've been very successful in what they have done. And they have hired their own. And I have been at these workshops when I was in graduate school. I remember at the University of Georgia, we had this feminist professor come in, and she was giving us tips for you know, the job market. And she told us exactly how to pose our scholarship in literature. So if you're doing you have a dissertation and it's, you know, feminist and it's radical, and it's not just, you know, women's rights, it's just basically subverting Western civilization. That's the whole agenda. She told us how to do it and how to pull the wool over the eyes of these old fuddy-duddies so they wouldn't know your real agenda. So they have strategies, and I saw a whole department changed. I had Hugh Kenner on my dissertation committee, an internationally known modernist, you know, one of those old style gentleman scholars. He had come down from Johns Hopkins, I believe, because UGA was seen as a pretty traditional school. Well, the whole department was transformed because they hired more of their own. And so the strategy that was laid out in 1962 in the Port Huron Statement has actually worked, and they've gotten power. And these professors are followers of Foucault, who is a follower of Nietzsche, who believes in power, and it's power in numbers. So it's not about ideas, it's not about the marketplace of ideas, it's about instituting your own worldview into a department by hiring people who believe what you believe and who are activists. They're not academics, they are activists. So political left-wing activism is now substituting for scholarship, and I'm seeing this in my field, English, where critical theory, which is a form of Marxism, is a sub-department, and people are writing about that. Also, one of the books that I investigated, going back to the feminist who gave the graduate students a workshop, there's this book that I cite. It's called Miss Mentor's Impeccable Advice for Women in Academia. And she kind of takes off on Miss Manners and talks about, you know, how to basically, you know, get yourself hired, how to fool people on hiring committees, get in, then hire more people who are just like you, and ultimately transform the whole department so that now English departments have hardly anything to do with literature. They're all about politics. They're about sexuality studies. They're about post-colonialism. If you're talking about Shakespeare is about Shakespeare. It has nothing to do with his literature. So the written word is just being devalued. Our wonderful literary heritage is being forgotten as a result of these activists hiring their own and taking over departments. So it's been a formal thing, and it's also been informal, and I've seen it personally, and I've read about it. So that's basically how it's been done, and it's been a very deliberate strategy, and anyone who wants to read the Port Huron Statement, Google it, you'll see where they talk about it. It's a very boring, long manifesto, but it's there.
All right, thanks. Dr. Furnish, your perspective on history.
Last year I taught civilian institution was 2007, and I remember there was a poll that I used. I taught World and Middle East history at George Primer, Dunwoody, sometimes now for there was a poll that I used that had come out, I believe, the year before, and it was a poll of American high school seniors. And I bring this up because I think we need to make clear the point that this doesn't start the day you walk onto this campus. This starts in elementary public high schools, which is why I often tell people, no offense to anyone, but I will sell one or both of my kidneys to keep my children in private school. Hopefully not the latter. But there was a poll, and it was American high school seniors, and it was a fairly large sample. I don't remember how many, tens of thousands if I recall correctly. And they asked them, who are the top 10 most influential Americans in American history? Does anyone ever recall this? Any American history professor? Now, I know how important the establishment of equal rights for Black Americans in the civil rights community struggle has been in this country. There's no denying that. After all, I'm a Republican, and it was a Republican who freed slaves. That's right. But in this poll, if I recall correctly, and I'm pretty sure I do, 6 of 10, according to like a majority of American high school seniors, 6 of the 10 most influential Americans in history were all civil rights leaders. I mean, Rosa Parks was in there, and of course, Martin Luther King should be in there. I'd agree with that. But there were some other people in there that rather almost obscure civil rights leaders. Alexander Hamilton wasn't in the top 10. Ronald Reagan wasn't in the top 10. I'm not even sure George Washington was in the top 10. But I mean, I just bring this up to indicate that, and my wife says sort of the same thing. She went to law school in Ohio. And when she took constitutional law, they studied one thing in constitutional law. Anyone care to guess? They studied civil rights. That is all they studied in an entire semester of constitutional law in a law school. Now, that's not an important issue, but aren't there some other issues dealing with the Constitution? I mean, there's a couple of amendments, and if I recall